Thank you so much for watching wherever you happen to be. Big show we have planned for you this evening. Angus Taylor has his brand new team. We will get into all of that. Nigel Farage has got some big news. We're in the United Kingdom in the next couple of hours. He will announce his shadow cabinet. We will get to all of that very shortly. And Robert Duvall has passed away, an absolute legend of screen. Won an Academy Award, not for The Godfather, not for Apocalypse Now, but we'll get to remembering him in a moment or two's time. And a reminder, we're going to be in Tasmania on Sunday. Looking forward to this, our town in Burnie. If you want to join us in beautiful northern Tasmania, please do so. Sunday night, join us live. Send me an email right now, ourtown@skynews.com.au, ourtown@skynews.com.au. Now, first, I don't believe the Prime Minister when it comes to his position on ISIS brides. Now, as I told you while we were on the air last night, the breaking news was that there were 11 families, 34 people who were going to start making their way back from a refugee camp on the other side of the world. They were eventually turned around and sent back. Now, today, the Prime Minister is up there and pretending that he's got a line in the sand and these people will never be welcome home because of wanting to join a caliphate, which, of course, killed people in the worst possible ways because they didn't fit in with a dream Islamic caliphate. This was the Prime Minister looking all tough on TV today.
We won't repatriate them, and indeed the government was taken to court by one of the non-government organisations saying that we had a responsibility, and they weren't successful in that. My mother would have said, if you make your bed, you lie in it.
The only problem is, Prime Minister, on your watch, not under the previous government, on your watch, you decided to let these people back. In 2022, in the early days of this government, the decision was made to allow ISIS brides and their kids back into the country. Remember?
A Happy Meal at Macca's in Punchbowl is a world away from war-ridden Syria. The Islamic State brides back home trying to adjust to a place they decided to leave 7 years ago.
And then, of course, last year, he got himself in a world of bother because he said, we weren't doing anything to help them. But guess what? They came back to Australia, remember?
They were smuggled out of prison camps in Syria, two so-called ISIS brides, successfully applying for Australian citizenship for their 4 children at our Beirut embassy, flying home to Australia 2 weeks ago.
Now, remember, the standard message from the Prime Minister is that he was never really worried about this as an issue. Put simply, because the kids had parents, one of whom at least was an Australian, or they were born in Australia, then they had to come home. And that meant that their parents, regardless of what had happened in the Middle East, why they had left Australia in the first place, well, why are you so fired up about this, he would say.
These are Australian citizens who are entitled to be in Australia.
So hang on, which is it? Are they Australian citizens which are entitled to be back, or is he now going to pretend, well, as my mum said, you make your bed, you have to lie in it? This is the ultimate example of each way elbow. Now, is he in the right place now? Yes. But that's what he should have been last year. That's what he should have been in 2022. And by the way, I am not going to cop this rubbish that because the government doesn't go physically pick them up, put them in a van and put them on a private jet and fly them into Sydney Airport, that the government has no role whatsoever in their capacity to be able to have these ISIS brides and the kids return to Australia. You have to renew your passport every, 10 years or so? Some of these people have been gone for longer than that. Some of the kids may never have had an Australian passport, meaning someone somewhere approved them to do so. Now, if this has to go all the way to the High Court, then let's let it go all the way to the High Court. Let's slow the ball. Let's put their applications at the bottom of the pile every single time. And the suggestion from the aid groups that one of the reasons they have to come back is because the teenage kids are very close to being radicalised. I'll give you the tip. If you're concerned about that there, we will be doubly concerned about it here. But I find it extraordinary, the capacity of the Prime Minister to have said one thing on this issue in 2022, 23, 24, 25, and now to say completely the opposite in 2026 and hope that we haven't paid attention for the past few years. Now, for some reason, this always works for Anthony Albanese. Hopefully, Angus Taylor's brand new team will be able to take the fight up. I look forward to not questions where the Prime Minister gets to, as he did last year, as he did the year before, as he did in 2022, to say, well, we weren't involved in the repatriation. Were you involved? And why did the Minister allow any paperwork to be filled out on their behalf whatsoever? They made the choice, and yes, that affects their children, but they made the choice to go and join the caliphate. There was no plan to come home. The caliphate failed, and because of that mistake, yes, their kids have had to be brought up in the horror that is a refugee camp. Well, sorry, too bad. Again, if this is a system where somehow, some way, a process that would take 2, 3, 4 or 25 years to be appealed through the courts, then let's go the long way. Because this government is trying to lie to you. Again, can we play the Prime Minister from this morning? Compare that with what he said the last time this issue's come around. I'm going to show you one more time. Here he is today on the Today Show over on Channel 9 this morning, or should I say not on the Today Show, on ABC News Breakfast today.
We won't repatriate them, and indeed the government was taken to court by one of the non-government organisations saying that we had a responsibility, and they weren't successful in that. My mother would have said, if you make your bed, you lie in it.
Okay, but the first time and the second time and all the other times we haven't known about it, what was his line?
These are Australian citizens who are entitled to be in Australia.
I don't trust him and I don't believe him on this one, and I don't think I'm alone. Now, as you know, when Pauline Hanson was on with Sharry last night, well, she made some news because she went too far in her comments about Islam and too far about her comments about Muslims here in Australia. You've seen it.
I've got no time for the radical Islam. Their religion concerns me because what it says in the Quran, they hate Westerners. And that's what it's all about. You know, you say, oh, well, there's good Muslims out there. Well, I'm sorry. How can you tell me there are good Muslims?
Well, of course, there are, right? We remember the guy who stepped forward, took the gun in that Hanukkah attack a few weeks ago. And we all know the difference between radical Islam, we go out of our way to talk about it constantly, radical Islam, and standardised Islam, okay? And yes, the media coverage has been exactly what you expect it to be, which is a sense of outrage about what was said by Pauline Hanson, and it didn't matter which way you looked, it was the standard reporting in and around all of this. And the Prime Minister, well, he didn't engage specifically with what was said on our air last night, but he understands that one nation is either certainly a threat to the Liberal Party, but depending on the seat, could maybe a threat to the Labor Party. Now, his assumption is that all of this will just be something that eats the libs, and the preferences mean he will end up increasing his majority at a future election. But here's what he said today about One Nation.
One Nation have always been about identifying problems, and a primary thing of your problem in life is because of people who don't look like you. That division that they have promoted consistently in Pauline Hanson and the One Nation people who've come and gone, most of them have left.
Firstly, not true, right? And again, remember, it was in the 2025 election, the one that was very successful for Albo, that One Nation was able to get a senator elected in New South Wales, a senator elected in Western Australia, Malcolm Roberts, of course, up in Queensland, and all of the polls would suggest in most of the states there would be at least one One Nation senator that is on their way. But a note of caution to those who think that there is one little thread that if you pull out, then all of the support will instantly fall down and everyone will go home and be good little Conservatives and get in behind Team Blue again. I want to remind you of the opinion polls. When Pauline Hanson went into the Parliament wearing the burqa, and again, you can like or dislike what she did, you can loathe or love what she did. but it did not affect the polls. In November of 2025, One Nation support was 15%. Despite all of the condemnation, and again, I think Pauline went too far last night, no question about that. But if anyone thinks that outrage is going to pull apart the numbers, you have not been paying attention to the numbers. This is not a 6% offering. This is a 27% offering right now. A whole bunch of people who have never been interested in One Nation, they are picking them right now. So as for part of the beginnings of the rebuild, part of, firstly, the opportunity to get everyone back who voted at the last election, and then to get everyone back that they lost between the 25 and 22 election, and then to get everyone back that they lost between the 22 and 2019 election, Angus Taylor has come forward with his brand new shadow ministry. Now, you've heard everyone else talk about it, so why not my opinion as well? Here is the opposition leader, pretty happy with himself on what looks like a pretty good team.
Our people are our greatest strength, and we'll make the most of everyone's contribution. I want a culture of healthy competition, the kind that lifts us all to deliver for Australians and to hold a bad government to account.
Now, chief and most amongst them, and we mentioned this during the live coverage on Friday, and again, thank you everyone who joined us for that rolling coverage. It was great for Peter Credlin and myself to be there as part of the primetime team, along with the best out of Canberra, to talk about things in real time. And we all landed on a consensus pretty quickly that Tim Wilson was going to end up being the shadow treasurer. He is now in a position to essentially be the leading moderate inside the party. Yes, that puts the current leader on notice to some degree, but I love this, because the way I'm going to talk about this is to put this in a way that everyone can understand, which is who goes up against who. What is the comparison? What is the debate? Now, both Tim Wilson and Jim Chalmers both backed themselves in. And don't forget, Tim Wilson was the one who identified, weaponised and was so successful at pulling apart the franking credits issues, not to mention the other tax changes that they took to a 2019 election. He is somebody who is unafraid of doing an interview anywhere. He will do it from the leftiest part of the ABC to the hottest part of Sky News primetime and all in between. He will be an excellent, strong, forceful advocate on the economy, and I was so pleased today to see that he decided to reach out to small business as his part of trying to work out how to boost those numbers back to get back in the game. As for the finance fight, well, that's all happening in the Senate. This is interesting because Claire Chandler, a person who, to be honest, many of us, certainly via primetime, have only known her through her capacity as a relatively junior or new senator from Tasmania, very strong on gender issues, but she's going to go right in there on finance. Now, Katie Gallagher, as anyone who's been on social media knows, is an absolute shocker. Missing $30 billion, she gets very chippy. Well, the good thing is Claire Chandler gets to go eye to eye, toe to toe in the Senate. And in question time in the Senate, you don't just get one question and you sit down, you get a couple of follow-ups. Now, hopefully, Claire Chandler, again, being someone unafraid to go to any camera, any microphone, anywhere, means that that is somebody who will take on the fight and not hide. In defence, now, James Paterson is almost best on ground for the opposition. We have seen what he did with the ISIS brides issued last year when he was in Home Affairs. We've seen him been able to identify problems when he was the shadow finance minister. We've seen him up the front of the bus. Well, now he is the shadow defence minister. However, he's in the Senate. Richard Marles is in the House. So there won't be the direct toe-to-toe if question time is what you pay attention to. It's certainly one of the few opportunities that governments have to be put on the back foot, but James Paterson, as a senator, gets access to Senate estimates. It means he gets to sit and talk to the people who are carrying out the orders of Richard Marles and put them under the pump. Again, attack, but somebody who's done the work. And he has done it as the numbers have been flowing away, and he was the one who had the balls last week to underline in red why there was a need for a change by talking about how 2 million people had turned away, 7,000 people from the Liberal Party, according to the polls. In the lower house, climate change and energy. Well, this matters because the energy part of this conversation is now Dan Tehan. Now, Dan Tehan, remember, was, in my view, almost as successful electorally as Tim Wilson because one of the most highly funded Tiffany Teals was running against him in the seat of Wannon. he was able to repel that charge, and he is fearless in being able to take on and point out the stupidities of Chris Bowen. He'll be able to do that in question time. Another Senate versus otherwise clash, but still, Michelle Rowland, Michaelia Cash, that will be a great debate. It'll be good to see. In small business, as you just saw there, Anna Lee. Now, Anna Lee and how she ended up in the small business ministry, I have no idea. But she's got a whole world of pain coming her way when Jacinta Price is breathing down her neck. What I did find slightly interesting was that Andrew Hastie a month ago, or less than a month ago, was having conversations about whether he should be the leader of the opposition. Now, he has been given a position which is the deputy leader in the House, which means he will be one of the 4 highest profile members of the opposition who will be able to speak to a whole bunch of issues. But industry is a relatively low profile ministry. Now, whether that is about the paranoia of Angus Taylor and his support, I don't care. But the really interesting thing is that part of his lineup here is how industry can be used to make us self-sufficient, about why we have to make things in this country. So I think they're putting their best foot forward. I think there are 1 or 2 people that I would have argued to be slightly higher and 1 or 2 people who I would argue to be perhaps inside of the tent, like I have no problems with an Andrew Wallace. But the best thing that I like about the team that has been put forward is that it is a whole bunch of fighters, it is a whole bunch of hard workers, it's a whole bunch of people who, full-time, their job now is to make it uncomfortable for the government. Because here's the reality. While the Liberal Party rebuilds itself, tries to rebuild itself in the polls, governments lose government. Oppositions make the most of the failures of government to be able to make the momentum change faster and faster, and I think there's an interesting new lineup of those ministers. Of course, there will be many a personal comment which will be made by Labor, its supporters, its mates in the media, and the enemy from within that has been, shoved up to the back of the bench. That's just the way it works for the Liberal Party. Again, Jane Hume, as the deputy leader, could have given herself a more significant portfolio. Instead, she's decided to, yes, be more general in and around economics, but she's not going to have one of the highest of high-profile jobs. Instead, she's being backed in as somebody, again, who will talk to any camera, anywhere, anytime.
As Angus said, there was an incredible depth of talent in our party room. I congratulate everybody that's whose name has appeared on the front bench.
All right, now, one other thing that I want to nip right in the bud, and I did this last week, but I want to make this nice and simple, so if you see this, you can tell your mates about it. If you find this on our website at skynews.com.au or YouTube, you can send this on to people. I'm sick and tired of the idea that history only applies to one side of Australian politics. Now, interestingly, there are things that lots of these people have said that become pretty thorny. Certainly, Pauline Hanson has decided that she thinks that Jane Hume may not be the second coming in terms of the ability to get the word out. In fact, she had a little crack at her as well last night.
I think she's very condescending. I think she's elitist and a snob.
And why? Because she said this during the break-up and the get back together when it comes to the Nationals. She said this on Sunrise, remember?
Quickly before we go, are you going to the Nationals? Because Little Proud is just welcoming people in.
Well, look, I do look very fetching in a Nakubra, Nat, I'll tell you that much. And I'd have to speak a lot slower and talk about the regions more often.
Ooh.
Down in Cocky's Corner.
She can't do that. She can't do that. She should say sorry for that, or that is going to be used, and believe me, it will be used uphill and down dale, not by the Labor Party, but certainly by One Nation, because the whole plan seems to be here that if Angus Taylor can't do it, Jane Hume will do it. We've made, of course, invitations to both to appear on this program, and funnily enough, they will not be on this program this evening. But I do want to speak up for them positively, which is, we now know how the government wants to work, which is that the government wants to pretend that everything that has ever been said by the people that are now in brand new positions with a brand new slate, no, they hold on to the baggage of opposition.
A bunch of blokes, organised by a bloke who couldn't hold his own seat, Michael Sukkar, sitting in a house somewhere in Melbourne, plotting to knock off the first female leader of the Liberal Party.
After the way he failed as Shadow Treasurer, he should be let absolutely nowhere near a budget. He is the last person that anyone should be taking advice from or lectures from when it comes to the budget position or spending restraint.
But we went and found the tape to prove the point that you already know. The one person in Australian politics who has been most benefited by the ripping down of female leaders or potential female leaders is Anthony Albanese. You see, he was working with Kevin Rudd behind the scenes to shiv the first female Prime Minister of Australia and the first female leader of the Labor Party. You remember we got the tape, right?
I rang the Prime Minister this morning and had a lengthy conversation with her. I informed the Prime Minister that I would be voting for Kevin Rudd in Monday's ballot. I went through the reasons why, and given my position as Leader of the House, I also offered my resignation.
And he was rewarded by becoming Kevin Rudd's Deputy Prime Minister. Not a decision that was made at 5 minutes to midnight to win a couple of votes. They were working hand in glove to shiv Julia Gillard. So anytime they talk about it, you look right back at Albo. He, of course, single-handedly stopped Tanya Plibersek, who was the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party after the 2019 election, to be able to rise as a representative of the left, his faction, to become the leader of the party in what would have been, seemingly, the slam dunk of the 2022 election. But, of course, he said no. He just jumped right over the top of Tanya. So he killed off Julia and he strangled the capacity of Tanya Plibersek to become the leader, so much so that even when they try to play, that's not, they don't hide it. And as for Jim Chalmers, you want to talk about some baggage. Again, if everything that was said before the last election applies for the next election and the one after and the one after and the one after, could somebody please remind Jim Chalmers what he said about negative gearing in 2019?
Housing affordability, which doesn't make important and considered changes to capital gains and negative gearing, has a hole in the middle of it.
Nothing to see here. Now, of course, the reality is that unless you are the person who is calling the shots, then you are able to argue that you were just following orders. Now, for some reason, the Labor Party is able to completely wipe the slate where everything they said in advance of a previous leader, whether they took decisions or whether they were just following orders, okay, that's all forgiven. But if it's the Labor Party, well, they get to pretend everything that you've ever said is what you believe forever. Of course, the reality is that when you're in charge, you do get a bit of a reset. However, you do need to deal with your past. Hence why Jane Hume should say sorry about what she said when it came to the Nationals, and hopefully she has in some other capacity. Angus Taylor has already said sorry for what happened when it came to the tax situation. Jim Chalmers never said sorry. Instead, he just waited and pretended that they weren't going to do exactly what they'll probably do in this budget, which is exactly what he was talking about in 2019. Watch this space, because we've always got the tape. Susan Lee's decision to leave the parliament means, of course, a by-election in the seat of Farah. Now, this is in the southernmost part of New South Wales, but it covers a region that is pretty significant. It's not just a seat that is in and around Albury, of course, on the New South Wales-Victoria border, but as you can see in this map here, that it starts to stretch in lots of different directions. In fact, the lap of the map, if we can, guys, which is, you can see here with Farah, that Farah is something that will take in a whole bunch of areas, right? Right up into and past smaller areas, and we start to get into places like Hay, etc., etc. There's lots of really interesting areas there. Just to the side is Riverina, which of course has Wagga Wagga in it, but Farah is a pretty big and decent place. One of our reporters was there today having a conversation with a collection of voters about how they're feeling, about which way they're going to go.
Like utilities, groceries, stuff like that, health. Here the hospital system's absolutely terrible.
The cost of living is the biggest problem we got.
The cost of living, unless you've got a decent wage coming in, I'm a pensioner, it just doesn't last.
Well, definitely the hospital, that's definitely a problem, and it has been for some time.
Now, of course, Australian voters, for some reason, talk about things that are clearly the responsibility of the state government, like a hospital, as something that potentially becomes an issue going into a federal election, but the federal government's in a position to turn around and say, here's the money. The opposition could also say, here's the money, but obviously is not in a position to be able to build anything because they are the opposition. But believe me, even if the government promises, here's the money, it probably doesn't end up turning up. Why? Because we know their attitude when it comes to regional areas. Regional Australia, to the Labor Party, is just a place to put wind farms, solar farms, telling people to shut up and just pay your taxes. That's their actual view, right, along with the Tiffany Teals and the Greens, who have forced the energy changes upon us so they can run around the world saying that the system that used to work pretty well is being replaced by the one that, fingers crossed, will work into the future. But, of course, this is, being a by-election, one where it's not just about the Liberal Party versus the Labor Party. In fact, the Labor Party doesn't do very well in this particular electorate. Instead, it's been a fight between, most recently, the Liberals and Tiffany Teal. I noticed today, by the way, that Tiffany Teal got a donation of more than $60,000. A single donor, $60,000. Because it is a retiring Liberal, the Nationals get to go up against the Liberals. Whoever finishes higher gets the preferences of the other. And then, of course, there is the steam train that is One Nation. But I wanted to show you something when you are starting to work out which way this seat starts to go, once you start to see polling. 75% of the preferences from Labor voters in the seat went to the independent. 81% of Greens voters went to the independent. Just 52% of the One Nation primary vote turned into preferences for the Liberal Party. 47% ended up going for the Tiffany Teal. Now, I'm going to make this one of the absolute catch cries of this show. I don't understand how anyone would vote number one for One Nation, would be giving their number two to the Labor Party, to the Greens or to the Tiffany Teals. They hate One Nation. And I mean hate. That if they could pass a law to ban them from the parliament, they would, and they think very little of those who vote for them. But people get to vote whichever they do. But of course, a high One Nation vote could mean not the numbers coming through to the Libs. The Libs may not end up sending the numbers to One Nation if they end up being the candidate at the end. Shooters. This is really important. I don't know what it is about shooters, fishers and farmers, voters, but many of them seem to have a little bit of a lean to the left. Now, you would think that a shooter, a fisher, a farmer wouldn't be backing in the Tiffany Teal, but that's what they did with their preferences at the last election. That's what they did in the by-election that happened just after the 2022 election. People first, family first, they're pro, but they're very small numbers. And again, Clive Palmer and his old trumpet of patriots. Remember when every sitting MP goes last? Even if it's 2, 3, 4%, if 61% of people are voting against. Now, again, you end up voting for the Tiffany freaking Teal over the Liberal, the National or the One Nation candidate. That's what the preferences did in 2025. One thing that is absolute about what will be taking place at this by-election is that there will be more people running, more money and more attention. According to Clive Palmer, again, the trumpet of patriots, no longer a thing. He's not interested in politics. He'll go on to continue what has been many, many millions of dollars in philanthropy, and good luck to him doing that. But there was a reasonable, not a huge, but a reasonable number of people who basically followed the how to vote card. The how to vote card was bugger everyone. They're all as bad as each other. Well, I'll give you the tip. If you've got a choice between One Nation and a Tiffany Teal, I can see one that is worse than the other. If you've got a choice between the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, I've got a view that one is worse than the other. We will see what happens when all of that plays out in the next couple of weeks and months.